Chapter 11. Dilemma of a Civil Servant and Young German Airman. A tall, fair, and very handsome young officer of the Luftwaffe stepped forward, saluted, then kissed my hand, saying, "You may not remember me. It must be several years since we last met when I was over in England studying." "Oh, yes," I said. "Of course I remember you, Ernst. But you seemed little more than a schoolboy then. You have changed a great deal." Ernst von Schöningen said, "I would like to take you a rather longer way around, as it is a lovely drive, and it will give us some opportunity to talk, because I think of things rather differently from my uncle, and I would like to tell you that perhaps he is a little extreme in his views about the National Socialists." "Yes, do tell me. But surely you are not a Nazi?" "No," he replied, "not exactly. There is much that they do and say that I hate, and so much is vulgar and false, but then the leaders are not educated men. But I cannot forget two things. First of all, I and most of my friends did not know what we could do, because there was no opportunity in the army or in the Air Force, and now Hitler has made it possible for us to have a future, and I cannot forget that. Secondly, Hitler has given some of us an idea that there must be more fair play for all classes, and that whatever class people belong to, they are Germans, and that in the days of Germany's disasters, all Germans must hold together." "Yes, my dear Ernst, that is all very well, but what about concentration camps for those who do not agree? And what about the church, and the press, and the universities, all of which have lost their freedoms?" "I know, and at times I have felt very troubled about these things. But is it not true that you always get excesses in times of revolution? I am sure that when things are more settled in Germany, and there is no fear of a counter-revolution, there will be more freedom again. In wartime, we all give up freedom, and I think Hitler is right, and that the state of Germany in 1933 was much worse than war, and that we all must give up much to get things right." "Does your uncle agree with you about this?" "No, I am afraid he is quite sure that only evil will come out of this revolution. One of the big differences between us is that my uncle is still attracted by conservative ideas. I think some kind of socialism was due to come after the last war, and after all the confusion that followed, we must have big social changes. Of course, my uncle realizes this, and we all know that if we do not have Hitler and his socialism, we should certainly have communism, and that really would be worse. If Hitler has done nothing else, he has prevented communism here, and I think we can be patient for a time and hope that some things in the revolution will improve. I do not like it myself, that Nazis are so vulgar, but it might have been worse, and it is only fair to be grateful for what he has done. I want socialism, but not communism. My uncle wants neither." As Ernst said this, we got out of the car. Frau von Siegersdorf, who was tall and dignified, with gray hair and lovely eyes, came forward to greet me. "I think I hear the car coming," said Frau von Siegersdorf. "Let us go and meet my husband." As we approached the car, two men got out, and she explained, "Oh, my husband has brought his old cousin. He is in the Ministry of Agriculture, at least if he has not resigned today. He so hates the Nazis that he is always on the point of resigning." During dinner that evening, I realized how irritated these two men had been at the conference in Berlin, where Nazi officials had apparently been throwing their weight around, although they knew very little of the technical side of the agricultural subjects under discussion. "Do forgive me for being very frank," I said, "but after all the things you and your cousin have said at dinner about the Nazis, I simply cannot understand why you both serve them by being in the ministry or constantly consulting with them. Surely by putting yourself and your knowledge at their disposal, you are keeping them in power." "Believe me," he said, "your question has caused some of us more mental agony than I can describe. Let me tell you how we argue about it, and how we have come to certain decisions. I believe we do right, although at times it is almost impossible to go on. My brother, as you know, is in the ministry, and I may say is very valuable to the ministry because he has so many years of experience. Fritz, won't you explain the kind of position you find yourself in?" Taking his cigar from his mouth, Herr von Holzkirchen said, "There is not much to tell. It is quite simple. I now have a young Nazi aged about 26 at the head of my office. He knows almost nothing about agriculture, and he hasn't even got any feeling for the country. In addition, he is an insufferably rude young man, and exercises his authority in the most ridiculous way. The point is that he would not care at all if I resigned. In fact, I think he would be glad if I did. These young Nazis are so appallingly ignorant that I really believe he thinks he could replace me with some young upstart like himself, probably one of his relations. The question now is, what will happen to agriculture in this country if this sort of thing goes on too long? You see," added Herr von Siegersdorf, "that is the crucial point. It seems to us that Germany is suffering from a sort of plague, but it is still Germany. And nothing is more important than that our agricultural policy should be carried out by men with adequate knowledge and experience. It seems to us our task is clear. We must be patient and put our knowledge at the disposal of those who are in control, however unpleasant they are. We believe that Germany must survive this political crisis, but after all the economic difficulties we have had to face, it is essential that anyone who knows anything about food production or land reclamation should serve his country and not just retire because it is so difficult." At this point, Frau von Siegersdorf joined in and said, "But the strain of living and working with people like that is terrible. The last 12 months have taken years off the lives of my husband and his cousin. In all their family history, wherein for hundreds of years the von Siegersdorfs have served the state, they never had to do it in such difficult circumstances." "Of course," I said, "I do see your point, and I think it is entirely right. But you will also see how few people in my country, and indeed other countries, realize circumstances of this kind. It just seems to us that the whole of Germany, apart from a very small underground movement, has put itself behind Hitler, and that is a very difficult thing for us to accept and understand." "Well," he said, "you can tell your friends in England that the position of the civil servant is the most difficult of all. So many of us felt we must continue to serve Germany, and yet it is perfectly true that by our holding together the structure of the state, as it were, we also keep Hitler in power. The international situation is not too good, and even if we think that Hitler is partly to blame for it, we as Germans care very much, if there is another war, which God forbid, that we have enough food." As the evening came to an end, Ernst von Schöningen came up to me to say good night, and added rather quietly, "I do not want you to misunderstand me. I am not really a Nazi, and I agree with most of what my uncles have said tonight. It is just that it is very difficult for young men like me who have been given a chance in life not to feel that we owe a debt to Hitler. Also," he added, "I think it is true that he does some very good things. The country was in such a terrible state that the ordinary machinery of government was too slow and too conservative to deal with it. Hitler made the country feel it must find a way out of its difficulties." "Yes, but Ernst," I said, "if he drives Europe into another war, it will be even more terrible for Germany and all of us after that." Very sincerely he replied, "Ah, pray God that does not happen." And then he added eagerly, "I would hate to fight England. Something inside me makes me feel I would always like to fight against the French, because my home is in the part of Germany that the French occupied with their black troops. But I would hate to fight England, for I think our two countries could so easily be friends." It was Sunday, and the last night of my visit to my friends. Young Ernst had seemed increasingly restless during my visit. It was obvious that the discussions we had had in that house during the past few days had disturbed him deeply. "How complicated it all is," he said. "I love my country deeply, and surely you can see I must be a loyal German and fight for Germany whatever government we have. You have made me realize that perhaps too often we try to forget the terrible things the Nazis do. We hope all the time that things will get better, but also there is always the other side, that there is now little unemployment. I do not feel that anyone in any other country or in this cared enough to do anything about that. Then Germany had to rise again. As a young German, I longed for that to happen, and I give thanks every day that the army is once again respected and that I have a job. But you have made me unhappy because, if it is all to end in war, then whoever wins, it means a lifetime of misery. Also, I love England. Don't you think there is any way to get our countries to understand? No one can understand Hitler, said his uncle from the other end of the room. Ernst took no notice, but looking at me said, "What do you think?" "Well, Ernst," I said, "I see no hope, unless these gangsters are thrown out, and I think sooner or later perhaps it will have to be the army that throws them out. I can see no other way." "Then you think it means another civil war or a European war?" "Yes," I said, "I begin to think so, and I am quite certain that if we do have a European war now, you will also have a civil war." "No," he said, "if Germany fights, we all fight together." "To begin with," I repeated, "but in time there cannot be peace between the SS and the army." He stood silent for a moment, and then running his hand over his hair, a habit I remember he had when quite young, he said thoughtfully, "I wish I could visit England again, but we work so hard now that there is no chance." Then, weary with the struggle that was going on inside him, he clicked his heels, kissed my hand, and without a word to his uncle or aunt, went out and up to bed. He was 19 years old, and still showed signs of the turbulent but generous nature I had often watched in his early childhood. As I joined the others, Herr von Siegersdorf said, "It is very hard for these young men. They are keen on the army and love Germany, but they are in a terrible dilemma." The next day when I sat in the train, I thought of this family and felt how complex life was. After that I went first to Latvia, and later I left for the Balkans, Bulgaria and Hungary. In every country I met students and country people. Among the young I found a curious, interested alertness about Germany, a kind of deep stirring within them that the German youth, as well as the Russian youth, had somehow got a purpose. There was something that made life worthwhile, and these young people were many of them impatient with their parents' criticisms, which at times drove them into defending much in Russia and Germany, which they knew in their hearts they did not really accept. They all want change, and they all want a chance to play some part in that change, but so few have any religious faith, which means they have few standards by which to judge between falsehood and truth in revolutionary movements. I was in 8 countries that year, never in hotels, generally among students and their parents. Among the younger folk, there was eager questioning or bitter hostility. Among the older, in every country, and almost more in Germany than anywhere else, an intense fear of war. This was summed up by one German woman who said, "How is it possible that when all Europe cries out for peace, we are still hurled towards war and destruction? How can it come when so many among the people in every land dread it and want to stop it?"